Hey guys, this is Nirupam with the Underwater Photography Guide and Blue Water Photo. Now, I'm here today with the Sony Universal Housing for 6 Sony cameras. That's the Sony A1, the A7S III, the A9 II, the A7R V, the A7R IV, the A7 IV, and I'm sorry if I missed anything, but I think that's all of them. Now, this is the full review. So I just got back to cold Washington from sunny California, where I did a pre-review with Andy Solomon that goes over all the housing features. This here is going to be my full review. I'm taking this thing underwater. Initially this is set up actually for the A1, and I'm going to reset it up for the A7 IV. So I want you guys to see how that can be done, although generally speaking we recommend that you guys send your housing into the dealer. In this case that would be us, Blue Water Photo, and then we can set up your housing for your next camera. Now that being said, sometimes your configuration can actually be changed in the field, which is what I'm doing here today. I'll film that, and if you guys ever have any questions about, does your camera work with the next camera for the housing, just reach out to us and let us know. Alright guys, well that's it. I got everything all set up. I've switched the A1 to the A7 IV, and we're all ready to get in the water and go diving. So I decided to finish this review at home. As you can tell, it was a bit windy and I just didn't want that in the mic. So let's finish up with my thoughts. I had some awesome dives here in the Pacific Northwest with the Sony Universal Housing. I've been pretty impressed with how nice and trim it was underwater. I have to say, this is an anodized aluminum housing. It's sturdy, it's solid, it doesn't scratch, but I was so impressed with how light it was underwater. One of the things that I thought was interesting while I was filming this video, I tried to place the housing like this, but you can see the port is so much bigger than the housing itself. It's actually impossible to see the housing. So that really goes to show you how small the housing is. It looks like any other anodized aluminum housing, so that, it creates this perception that it's a large housing, but in reality, if you actually compare it to other housings, it's a lot smaller than some of its competitors. So underwater, I also felt like it was really light compared to a lot of the other competing housings, and that was a pleasant surprise. That's not always the case with CNC, and I think the new engineers did a really amazing job with the Universal Housing. Now, there's a few other features that really helped me out when I was diving that I think are just awesome, and I'm really happy to see them, especially on aluminum housing. One is the clear back. So most aluminum housings have a pretty small screen for the LCD. Usually you can just see the LCD. CNC has adjusted this housing so that the back of the housing has a much larger view for the LCD. With mirrorless cameras, you no longer really need the viewfinder. I mean, it's good practice to have a viewfinder when you're shooting, but you don't need it. You don't need to spend the extra money because the autofocus system is the same in the viewfinder as it is in the camera. Therefore, it's really nice to have a nice, easy view of the LCD, and I really enjoyed that as well. Now, CNC is all about viewage. Maybe there's a better word for that, but CNC is all about being able to see what you're doing, right? What I really also like about this housing, and probably one of my favorite things about CNC in general, is all the buttons are really nicely labeled, but they're also glow in the dark. So if you're in dark conditions like we are in the Pacific Northwest, or if you're on a night dive, you can actually really see what you're doing, and that's really nice to be able to just see that button, see how it's labeled, hit it, and you're good to go. Now, maybe my one complaint about the Universal Housing is that the buttons do have slightly different labels between cameras. Now, it's very easy to get used to what label works with what button on which camera, but it does take a little bit of muscle memory for a couple of the buttons here. Now, that's not every button, it's just a couple of buttons. They do need different labels depending on what camera you're shooting, and of course, we at Blue Water Photo can get you that if you do have two different types of cameras. Now, when it comes to the compatibility, you guys saw me set up a Sony A7 IV when I was initially shooting an A1, so I switched between two cameras. Now, it's not going to be as easy to do in the field with every camera model, but some camera models like the A7 IV and the A1, or the A7S III and the A1 can be switched out pretty quickly. So I do recommend reaching out to us if you have two different cameras, and we'll tell you what conversion kit you need and if that can be done in the field or if you need to send it back to the dealer. In the case with the A7 IV to the A1 that I was doing, all I had to do was adjust the tray and put it in the housing and it was good to go. So it is a little bit complicated, which is why I recommend you reach out to us, and that would be at sales@bluewaterphotostore.com to really figure out your housing situation if you do have multiple cameras. But ultimately, the affordability of the Sony universal housing when you have multiple cameras far outweighs getting two different housings with another manufacturer. Now, speaking of affordability, I do think the universal housing, now that the price has dropped, is extremely affordable. So it starts at $4,395, I believe, and it goes to about $4,500 for the housing. Now remember, if you've got multiple Sony bodies, that could be any of the 6 bodies, it's well worth it to get the universal housing because of that. Now, another nice thing about going with CNC and the CNC universal housing is that they offer optical TTL flash triggers that can be used with the popular YSD3 strobes. So, you know, if you want good TTL with your YSD3s, this is going to be the best housing to do so. Finally, there are 2 other awesome features that I wanted to talk about that really helped me shooting when I was underwater that CNC has updated. The first is this fiber optic cable holder. So when you put your fiber optic cables onto the ports on the housing, this holder will actually allow you to keep the fiber optic cables on your housing. You never have to worry about them popping off, and it works extremely well. And that's one of the annoyances I've always found with pretty much any housing brand. Fiber optic cables always come off. That's not the case with the universal housing, so that's really cool. And I also really like the grips. I mean, these grips were introduced with the new MDX housings, and overall, they're definitely my favorite handles to use out of any underwater housing. It just feels really nice. It's got that traction with the rubberized grips, but it's also sturdy with an aluminum handle. You don't have to worry about that breaking on your dives. Overall, the button action is very nice as well. The dials turn really nice. You've got easy back button autofocus. So this housing has all the bells and whistles. I am super happy with it. And with an updated vacuum system, you no longer have to use the Vivid Leak Sentinel. So yeah, maybe that's 4 additional things that I wanted to talk about. Overall, the new vacuum system was also very easy to use, and it's much easier to use than the old Vivid Leak Sentinels that we used to have on CNC housings. So that's pretty much it. I'm gonna keep it nice and short and sweet because we do have a longer pre-review video that goes over all the features on the housing itself that you can totally watch if you do think you wanna get this housing and you wanna know every feature on it. We've got another video for that. But I just wanted to talk about some of my thoughts while I was shooting underwater with the CNC Universal Housing. Overall, I'm stoked. I love it. I think it's an awesome housing. It's got great trim. It's got all these great features. It's very easy to see what you're doing. The buttons are easy to use. The new back is awesome. The new vacuum is awesome. So I'm pretty enthused about this system. And if you are too, make sure you reach out to us at sales@bluewaterphotostore.com. We'll get you set up. Make sure you tell us what cameras you're going to shoot the housing for, and we can get you figured out in terms of can you get it set up in the field, what conversion kits do you need, and anything else that you need to get set up with the housing. So with that, if you like this video, make sure you like and subscribe. That helps us create more content for you guys. And hopefully I'll see you guys out there shooting with a CNC housing.